All right, let's explore this further now and speak to political analyst Sandile Swana, local government specialist as well, Dr. Tim Maake. Thank you so much to you both this afternoon for your time. I'll start with you, Mr. Swana. The State Capital Commission came out very strongly against cadre deployment, and now in its papers, when you look at what the DA is saying, they're arguing that it undermines the rule of law and fosters corruption, which they say has resulted in state capture and large-scale corruption. But the ANC says the DA's belief that the policy is the root of the failure in the public service is misguided. Your thoughts on this?
Yes, it's an interesting debate. But one of the interesting things that we've got to observe in this matter is that it was a finding, not a recommendation, but a finding of the Zondo Commission that the cadre deployment policy of the African National Congress is in conflict with the Constitution on a number of grounds. Now, there are two things to consider there. One, you could say conceptually or logically, whether in fact, when you read the policy before you implement it, whether it has chances that it would actually lead to problems and be in conflict with the Constitution. Two is whether after it was implemented, in fact, there is evidence, including the testimony of members and leaders of the ANC, that it in fact collapsed government or constrained government from performing properly. So that is the crux of the matter. The ANC, for its part, is claiming that you cannot have a civil service that is not appointed by you and controlled by you. And at some point, they quoted a case in the UK where they say that Margaret Thatcher apparently at some point could not implement her conservative policies because the civil service was in disagreement with them. So that is basically where the debate is at for the time being.
And before we delve deep into the debate, I'd like to ask you something you said there when you talk about this evidence, because it's going to be critical that we see it being laid bare, that this was the moment that, there may have been influence here and thus led to that particular decision and the collapse. How easy will it be for this to be proven?
Bear in mind that the advocate for the DA makes an interesting point again, because he says, we've not come here to determine whether Barbara Chris or Barbara Hogan or any other leader or Mantashe or Cyril Ramaphosa was lying when he testified under oath to the commission. That's not what we're arguing here. We accept what they said at the commission as is. We're not testing the facts, whether it was true or false. So the evidence is not going to lie there. It's just accepted as they presented, because it was the ANC members themselves who were testifying.
And, when this debate always comes about, I suppose even with the ANC talking about how they, for themselves, they're quoting Margaret Thatcher and they're using it in the political context. Let's start then with this particular point, and then I'll get to the next one in just a moment. Is cadre deployment unique to the ANC, in your view?
No, cadre deployment is part and parcel of South African history. But unfortunately for you and me, South African history is a very terrible history. The Broederbond and the National Party, the Broederbond in particular, selected people for every single position that was available in the state in a whole effort of promoting supporters of the Broederbond and the National Party, as well as whites in general, to the exclusion of the general population. So the history of cadre deployment in South Africa has been disastrous up to this point.
And I wonder then, when it comes to, the deployment, as then some argue, within the political parties, how do they then ensure that their policies, because of course they have policy conferences, they have policy positions, how then do they ensure that their policies are implemented if they are not going to be deploying like-minded individuals, but at the same time, how then do they ensure that these people that they are deploying are not beholden to them, but simply delivering services?
It's a very tricky thing, and we can have cases to look at. As an example, the Army of South Africa needs to be totally professional, regardless of who wins an election. Every soldier, every general, every commander has to actually protect the state of South Africa without favoring any political party. So similarly to judges in our courts, if you are a judge, you need to be independent of who wins any election, and you don't even want to be part of any deployment committee or appointed by any deployment. You want to be totally independent. If you are a university principal, imagine if university principals were people who are chosen by the ANC, who need to make sure that the whole syllabus and curriculum of the university aligns with the policies of the ANC, this, that, and the other, rather than robust scholarship, etc., etc. So there is a lot that needs to be discussed, whether our civil service should be thoroughly professional and implement the manifesto of the winning political party. When that party loses, go on to the next one.
And that's a very interesting debate to have. And I do understand that Dr. Maake has now joined us again. Dr. Maake, thank you so much for your time. The Constitution in Section 197 says that no employee of the public service may be favored or prejudiced only because that person supports a particular political party or cause. The ANC argues in court that it has a right to freedom of expression with respect to political choices on who should lead in the public sector. How does this make things difficult where governance at a public service level is concerned?
Thank you very much, and compliments of the new year to you and the viewers at home. And I think while I've joined halfway, I agree with my colleague. For us to be able to understand quite very well, we need to first put it into perspective that it's not for the first time that we see cadre deployment in this context. It is called cadre deployment now, but we may have not been aware what it was called during the previous system of government. Now, the question that you're raising, we need to understand that even the current political parties that are in court, all of them are deploying people that they prefer to be able to administer the policies that they have sold to us as I'll say the consumers or the constituencies. Now, what makes the whole thing difficult to get to what my colleague was saying and the question that you're raising is that you need to have matured people, because this thing has been happening and there's not been any problems whatsoever the case might be. That's the reason why even now the fact that the DA is in court with the ANC is driven by an event. And what is that event? The event is called load shedding and all those other secondary issues which they refer to as poor service delivery. But the crux of the matter is that this has been with us. It's just that it is defined as acceptable when it suits certain political organizations or individuals. But the fundamental thing is worldwide. If you win the elections, you have the right to choose who you want to be your implementing tools. And I think that's one thing that we first need to admit, that it is not something that we can do away with. But what we need to deal with is the fact that once you have Professor Sandile Swana been preferred by any political party to go in as their implementing tool, it is therefore called upon Professor Sandile Swana to understand and appreciate that now he has to act in the best interest of everyone. And I think that is more of the caliber of people that you put into those various positions, to be able to appreciate and understand that they have been preferred to implement the policy of that particular ruling party, but within the context of the law.
Lots to talk about here, and I do hope we speak again about this in future. Thank you so much to you both for your time. That was a political analyst, Sandile Swana, and local government specialist, Dr. Tim Maake.